theater. As a personal side, hello? I think I need help and no one is here. Or exists, maybe.
So, what were you saying?
That's how all these podcasts should begin. So, what were you saying?
What
were you saying? This movie I hadn't watched until probably about a year ago. So I don't have nostalgia for this movie, which I think is part of what made me make these observations about it.
Yeah, can I confess? This was like a big movie for me when I was a kid.
I'm not surprised
by
that. I'm not surprised by that. Yeah.
I don't know why. It was just one of those like comfortably numb films.
Yes.
And when I rewatched it after like college, like I went away for like it was just a VHS tape that I was like, yeah, this in Clear and Present Danger. Yeah. I was like, Tom Clancy, this shit. And as a kid, I really liked the sniper character in Clear and Present Danger and Patriot Games. I don't know. I just liked Harrison Ford, obviously, but like. It's not shit that a kid would care about.
Exactly.
It's very not.
Exactly.
And so it was weird that I liked it. And then I rewatched it and I was like, that's not what I remember. I thought there was a lot more action in these movies.
Yes.
But anyway.
That's the thing about this movie that I was surprised by too when I watched it. It's because this movie is not technically the first, but sort of the beginning of our love affair with Jack Ryan, the character. And the movie, by the way, for the audience's sake, is Patriot Games. Right. But you've seen it. You clicked on the episode, so you know. Patriot Games, right. That's what we're going to talk about today. But Jack Ryan was technically in The Hunt for Red October, being played by Alec Baldwin. Right. But the character...
Yeah, he's just a CIA analyst.
Yeah, he's a character, but he doesn't hold the national consciousness the way that Jack Ryan started to with Patriot Games. Patriot Games is sort of when we were like, oh yeah, man, that's the guy. Maybe because it's Harrison Ford, but I have some arguments for that or other reasons. But basically after Patriot Games, we started making Jack Ryan stuff and have kind of never stopped. Right? We're still making it. Aren't we? Isn't Jim Krasinski playing Jack?
Yes, obviously.
Yeah, I was like, okay. Yes. I was like, did they cancel it? No, not that. No, so I mean, and I, for whatever reason, I always connected Jack Ryan to Harrison Ford, and was kind of surprised looking back that he was basically only Jack Ryan in 2 movies, because he's not Jack Ryan in Air Force One, right?
He's also not Jack Ryan now. Like, he's a lot more of an action hero now.
Sure, that's accurate. Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah, so...
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So, when you think of Jack Ryan movies, what do you think they are, generally speaking? Like, how would you summarize them?
I mean, this is kind of... I've read your argument.
It's a little facetious, I know.
And I think you nailed upon something here, so I don't want to bury the lead. But I'll say that my real answer to that is time has changed and altered the narrative. But originally, Jack Ryan was like... The whole appeal of Jack Ryan, in my mind, was that he was kind of the nerdy guy who got invited to the important table.
Yes.
Like Sum of All Fears. Yeah. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. Ben Affleck, right?
Yeah. It's that scene where they're like, all right, boy, here's your chance. The President of the United States just walked in the room and he's looking for answers. And you said you had the answer? Well, tell me what the answer is. And he's like, sir, I think it's very important that I did that. Good job, boy. Sit down. It's very much little CIA boy gets the shot at the big time to be a major player, and he nails it. That's Jack Ryan.
Yes, and also, for those of us who are not familiar with the trajectory of Jack Ryan in the novels, I discovered this today doing some research. Apparently, he becomes president.
Really?
Yes, in the Tom Clancy novels, he becomes president.
Whatever. Tom Clancy,
So, I mean, hey, man, the man's made a fortune doing this. Right, and so, I think you said exactly what I was hoping you would, which is, essentially, you think of Jack Ryan as being a political figure who's, sort of dealing with the top-level people and a little out of his depth, but he rises to the occasion because he's American. He's like a quintessentially American CIA boy.
Very American, yeah.
Right, and there's also a little bit of action. He's involved in action stuff. right?
He truly is a demolition man. Sorry, that'll be out of touch. We just talked about that, so that's a joke for me and him. That wasn't for you.
You love it.
You may not have listened to that episode.
If you didn't,
or it may not have come out. I don't know. Who's running the ship? Continue,
no one is.
Adam.
No. Thank you for bringing up Demolition Man. Basically, Demolition Man will serve as a specter.
But it's the same thing, though, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Get the fuck out of here. All right. So look, as a launch pad for Jack Ryan, Patriot Games, I had certain expectations about what the movie was going to be. And I believe that people remember it differently than what it is. Because Patriot Games actually is not as much a political thriller as people remember it. And in fact, it violates all kinds of rules for political thrillers because it doesn't actually want to tell a political story. And so I want to get into the ways that Patriot Games violates the rules of engagement. That's what I want to talk about today. Ooh, yeah, titles. Ooh.
Well, I can see one violation, and that's on the terms of engagement. I don't remember the name of the movie, but this is the most reserved use of Samuel L. Jackson I can ever think of. It's crazy how fast he became Samuel L. Jackson.
Yes.
You can't use Samuel L. Jackson in a movie like he's used in this movie, where he's like, a lot of his lines are just like off screen.
Yep, basically.
Like, they're like, we're just getting getting B-roll of like like a Christmas tree, and he's just like talking. It's like Samuel L. Jackson just talking, and you're like, why the fuck are we on a Christmas tree?
They just didn't know yet.
Cut to Samuel L. Jackson. What the hell's wrong with
They
you?
didn't know yet. They had no. See, he hadn't.
They
eaten
didn't know.
He hadn't eaten the Big
They didn't
Kahuna
know
burger.
yet.
He hadn't eaten it yet.
Mm-hmm. He hadn't eaten it yet. You're absolutely
That's
right.
really what it
about
is.
that.
He hadn't dealt with Brett yet. Once he dealt with Brett, then we knew who he was.
Ah, yes, 1992.
Yeah. Okay, so Patriot Games. So in order to tell, so the first point I want to make about Patriot Games is it takes about an hour to make a fundamental narrative decision that in most movies, especially in political thrillers, would have happened about 30 minutes into the movie. And what I mean specifically is that this movie chooses to have Jack Ryan join the CIA around the midpoint of the script instead of to close the first act. That doesn't sound like a big deal. Let me explain why it is. So first things first. Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit more in depth about the way that feature screenplays are structured, because it will help us understand what this choice means. So, first thing is, in a movie, the first act is essentially an act of setup, and in it we learn the following things. We learn here's our protagonist, and our protagonist has a problem, a need. Right? And there will be some event, usually an inciting incident, but not always, that will ask the protagonist to basically leave the world they know behind and join into a new world that they are not accustomed to. Sort of a chaotic world, if you will. And the decision to cross into that world is usually the end of the first act. That's if you use Dan Harmon's story circle, for those of you who are really interested in this topic, Dan Harmon has done a really nice job of boiling down this process into what he calls the story circle. And crossing the threshold, which is the third step of his 8 steps, is usually the end of the first act in a movie. So most movies, what's going to happen is you're going to have, a couple of scenes where okay, here's who the guy is, here's his family, here's the things that he cares about. And then something happens to him. And then he has to decide, okay, well, now I'm going to have to do something about this, or else I won't be able to move forward. I got to do something. So here's some examples. In Groundhog Day, Phil Connors, the weatherman, goes to Punxsutawney, eager to get the hell out of there. Then it turns out he gets frozen in a loop where he experiences Groundhog Day over and over and over again. So you would think, oh, well, that's the end of the first act. It isn't. The end of the first act is the moment he says, you know what? I'm going to accept this curse, and I'm going to have the best time I possibly can. And there's a really key scene where he piles in a car with these 2 drunks, and he goes, I'm not going to live by their rules anymore. Your whole life, they tell you to do this, this, and this. I'm not going to do it, right? And so he chooses, yes, I'm going to act like a complete maniac that's unhinged because I can. That is the end of the first act in Groundhog Day. It's
or another way, I think, Field screenplay says, kind of the same example is that it's almost always a scene that is saying, I am going to do the movie.
Yes.
Like the conflict that is this movie, I choose to be participant in.
Yes, that's exactly
Or
it.
that's kind of the here, or that choice is made for them, and it's like a story where it's like someone getting like the shit beat out of them all the time or something like that. There's like, yeah, but it's usually for the hero or for like the kind of, if you look at the bell curve of like people like Vonnegut mapping out like stories, it's something that almost everyone kind of agrees with the 3x structure, is it's a choice.
Correct. So just one last example, because it's literally the clearest I've ever seen in a movie, maybe. The most clear example of this is the red pill in The Matrix.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
the
exactly.
Matrix,
Just choose a pill.
the first 30 minutes, it's like, you know, you can feel it when you're paying your taxes, Neo, right? And he's like, what is the Matrix, right? That's the first 30 minutes. What is the Matrix? Is this a real thing? He's trying to find Morpheus. Then he finally does. And Morpheus says, here are 2 pills. You take the blue pill, there's no movie. You take the red pill, there's a movie. And he takes the red pill, and then he's born into a chaotic world, literally crossing the threshold from the quote-unquote Matrix to the real world.
He's now Neo. He's
Yes.
not.
He's no longer Mr. Anderson.
John Anderson.
Right, exactly.
John Anderson. Probably.
Yes, that's right. Nice job. That's correct.
So
So
great, I did it. Was it made in the 90s? Is the male protagonist named John
or Jack?
You got a bingo.
Yeah. That's a bingo.
That's a bingo.
So the reason that I've gone into detail about this is most movies are going to take max about 30 minutes to do this. Why? Because the movie starts to feel like the movie that you came to see once this decision gets made.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like basically everything you saw in the trailer, for the most part, is going to be after this decision gets made. It's where the premise of the movie plays out, right?
And let's not get you who are listening to this with all of your complex thoughts and all of your dreams and all of, just the myriads of aspects that make yourself, you would turn into a cave person. If 25 minutes into a movie, it was like, but this is not the thing that I wanted to go see.
That's correct.
The trailer said it was going to be this.
That's correct.
What the fuck? We'd all turn into absolute Neanderthals.
Right.
Because it's like, you're wasting my time.
You're boring me. I'm bored.
Buddy.
I want to get started. I want to feel like I'm getting started.
So
right?
I guess, are you making the argument that in Jack Ryan, he needs to be doing some sweet analysis?
Well, so that's the thing, right? So thank you for saying that. So in this movie, technically the first act ends when Jack Ryan interferes with an assassination attempt on an English royal person, because he's abroad in London to give a lecture, right? Technically, that moment is the end of the first act. The problem with it is we don't know anything about the guy. We basically, all we know is, because we haven't met Jack Ryan before, we don't remember him as a character from other movies. All we know is he's got a family, and he loves his family, and he's giving a lecture about some advanced politics in London, and that he's got some courage. That's all we know. So the decision to interrupt this terrorist act does not feel to us like a choice to enter this chaotic world of vengeance and political, espionage and stuff, which is technically what it is.
Yeah.
It's technically what it is. All it really feels like is a courageous citizen who's like, I'm going to stop this gunman. The kind of thing you could see on a cell phone, not in a feature necessarily, right? So the problem is that it turns out Jack Ryan has actually been invited to be a part of the CIA and turned it down. And what he needs to do is use the CIA to solve this problem that he brings on his family, right? And so joining the CIA and using that job to enact vengeance or protect himself and his family feels like what the end of this first act should be. And most movies, that's exactly what it would be. I'll give you a counterpoint. John Wick, right? So in John Wick, it's his wife, right? Doesn't his wife get killed right up top? And then they kill his dog.
His wife died,
Right.
and then the dog is reminiscent of the
correct.
wife, and the one thing that he cured himself of, like, the disease.
Correct.
So it's
the dog being killed launches Keanu Reeves is now going to be a killer assassin that's going to go murder everybody that did this, right? That's what happens. Now, imagine that it took him an hour to decide to assassinate people, and the terrorists, or these people who kept attacking his dog, they also attacked his sister, and they attacked his uncle in Cleveland, and then they attacked his foot, and like, you know what I mean? They just keep like doing these little things to him until he finally decides to be an assassin. You would be frustrated with him for that. You'd be like, why?
Get
Come on,
to the
man!
assassin
Murder,
part.
murder! Do it! You know?
Yeah, the dog was enough. Yeah.
But in this movie, he doesn't join the CIA till an hour into the movie, and that's interesting.
It's
right?
an origin story, though. It's more akin to Batman Begins.
A little bit. Yes, that's correct. It is more akin to Batman Begins, except for we already know where Batman Begins is going when we watch Batman. That's important.
That's true.
And we don't know that about Jack Ryan at this point in history. Right? I think you could redo Patriot Games the same exact way and have a different experience because we do know who he is. Like now we do. But we didn't then. So that's important.
I agree. We should remake Patriot Games as a Batman movie.
Honestly, that's not that crazy.
That's what you're saying,
That's
right?
not that crazy. I mean, that's a good joke. I'm Jack Ryan.
I'm Jack.
Yeah. Let me analyze you. Here's a paper.
Oh, God, he's do so much analysis, dude. And he's a family man. Like, he's got a family.
Correct.
Like, he's Batman, but he's got a family.
Correct.
It'd be perfect.
It would be very good. So, also, just briefly, the other Jack Ryan movies do make this decision at the 30-minute mark. The decision, like, okay, we're going to take on this case. Okay, we're going to find out what this Red October's deal is.
Does clear and present danger do it, though?
He is assigned to the case at the end of the first act, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure he's assigned at that point.
I'll take your word for it.
I didn't rewatch it, but I'm
danger.
pretty sure because then there's like espionage inside the Pentagon
Point
stuff.
is, this may be the only reason I bring it up is if we treat this like an origin movie,
Which we
or we treat
should.
it as a like a model for Jack Ryan movies.
Well, I'm not sure that the makers of this movie think they're doing a franchise, but I think the fact that you're bringing up an origin actually enhances my point. I think you're right. It is kind of an origin story.
Okay.
But I'll say why later. But thank you for bringing it up because we should talk about that in a minute. Okay, so I think I've covered that in some detail. I just want to say briefly, so with respect to this movie, joining the CIA also could have been done in the first act if we were going to spend a lot of time discovering who these dudes are. Right? If we were like, okay, like this was a mysterious terrorist organization and we don't know anything about them, and so like we need to learn what happened, if that was part of the story, then him joining the CIA would have happened at the 30-minute mark, and the rest of the movie would be like trying to track him down, and that's not really what this is. That's actually not what this movie is. It's what you think it is because you think that's what a political thriller should do. That's not what happens in this movie. So we'll hold on to that. Okay, so one last point, and that is most first acts have what you might call a debate period. Okay, so what happens is the hero gets a call to adventure. Usually, you know, in the case of The Matrix, he gets a literal phone from Morpheus, and he's like, okay, follow me, Neo, if you want to live, right? Like, and he takes the call, and then he refuses it, right? He gets outside of the window, and he sees the agents bearing down on him. He's like, I can't do it. Right, so there's a debate. I can't do this. You know, I don't know if I believe you. Most movies have that moment. This movie doesn't have that moment, and in fact, it stretches the debate moment of like whether I should join the CIA out for like 40 minutes. Right, and his family suffers, and people keep visiting him. Like, so basically, that decision.
It's not like all of that time is exclusively spent on that. I don't want that to be confused.
Not really.
Like,
not really.
Because him, like his daughter, a lot of the family stuff is brought up in that first half of Act 2.
That's most of the movie, actually, is family stuff, and the beginning of the movie is family stuff, and that's basically where we're going to end up here. But they spend a lot of time on that.
But I just don't want it to make it seem like he sat there for 40 minutes and debated over like whether or not he's going to join the movie.
No, that's true, but the family becomes a piece of leverage in the debate.
Yes, exactly.
Like, and so that's really what's happening is that the family is becoming intertwined in the decision in a more than business way. Intertwined in the should I commit to being in the CIA or not.
That's
true. So there's that. Okay. I've covered that point. So here's the second point. The villains in this movie are just horribly conceived villains for a political thriller. And here's some evidence for that. So the first thing is the plot for these villains is they're going to assassinate a member of a royal family instead of like a political figure or a politician or anything, because they think that makes more of a statement. Now, this is in the early 90s, so that means the terrorist group is a splinter cell from the IRA. Right, so the IRA,
who actually decry the IRA for not doing enough, so they're more radical.
They're more
than the
radical
IRA.
than the IRA because you know, and I don't blame them for this. Hollywood doesn't want to weigh in explicitly on the IRA. You know what I mean? Like they don't want to.
Right.
They don't want to be like the
so
IRA
they're
is
just
bad.
making an analogy.
Yes. Right. So they're using them as a template. But the problem is that because they have to be a splinter group from the IRA, they don't have a goal that makes any sense. The whole time, the terrorists don't have a goal that makes sense. From the very beginning of the assassination plot all the way through the very end, that, spoilers, ends in Jack Ryan's actual residence in Virginia or Washington or wherever it is, they don't have a plan that actually enacts a political goal.
No, it's punishment. It is literally
Vengeance.
Revenge.
Vengeance.
It's vengeance.
Correct.
Yeah, that I think is actually that is one of the powers of this movie.
Yes,
to me,
thank
because
you.
Just as I don't know if you're
I
going
am
to say
going
this
to.
later.
So hang on to this.
Okay, never
no,
mind.
No, thank you, because you're making exactly the point I want to make. So hang on to it because I want you to be able to say it too. So just so everybody understands, killing like Prince Andrew or Fergie would be a horrible thing, but probably wouldn't create like political tension between a suppressed nation. Like it.
It would be wanton violence.
Yeah. They don't do enough to justify it. Okay, so then what happens is when they enact their plan, which by the way they kill IRA members to do it. When they begin to enact their plan, because Sean Bean's brother is part of the assassination plot, who gets killed by Jack Ryan, the entire plan shifts to let's fucking get Jack Ryan. Let's just get him. Let's get Jack Ryan.
Because he killed his baby brother.
Correct. And because
Sean Bean's baby brother.
Right, and his baby brother, my baby brother.
Baby brother.
And it goes to great pains to try to keep the royal family member in the picture so that it looks like they're also accomplishing a political goal. But basically, this terrorist group decides we're going to kill non-CIA member American Jack Ryan for stopping us from killing this guy.
Later CIA agent.
Right, but then later CIA. So much the better. So much the better.
So much, yeah. Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Because he even asked. That's one of the things that gives credence to the terrorists is that under oath, which he said. And we're supposed to be on the side of Jack Ryan here because he's our protagonist, right? He answers the question specifically, are you a part of the CIA? And he goes, no. And so, and then Sean Bean sees that he's now a part of the CIA, and he goes, oh, I wasn't a part of the CIA. I see how it is. So, it does spin a narrative.
Yes, it does.
It does absolutely spin a narrative.
Right.
And that's something that, a lot of us would be, if we saw someone, who did a crime, let's say.
Sure.
And a crime against us. And that person testified under oath that they weren't a part of the thing, and then we looked into it and we said okay, yeah, no, he is not on the payroll of the CIA, but then immediately goes and joins the CIA. We'd be like, but you were fucking in the CIA,
yes you were,
though.
yes you were, yeah, yeah.
So it gives that kind of conspiracy theory nut, just complete abstract thought that the terrorists are having.
The veneer
to
of
justify it as a political crime.
Correct.
Even though emphatically they don't have a thing other than revenge as their main basis. Yeah.
So I want to dive into the rationale of this just a little bit more to prove that not only are these guys stupid for real life terrorists, they're stupid for movie terrorists too. So I just want to make these 2 points really quick. The first is that the fact that they insist on this vengeance plot when it becomes infeasible, and the fact that they decide we're going to invade America to do it, you could never ever ever survive that. You could not survive that. Even the worst president in the world would take vengeance on that. So that is the end of your movement. Trust me, don't do it. That's a bad decision, terrorists. So that's a bad real-life terrorist organization. Now, they also spend incredible resources planning for this. They have a base in the desert. They got hidden sleeper agents and bookshops. They got drones and stuff. They got power boats and weapons and night vision. They got a lot of money and funding. And they have enough to do way more than say a September 11th. They could do a lot of worse terrorist acts is the point. They could take down Big Ben. They could blow up Buckingham Palace. They could do a lot of stuff that would do some damage.
They could do a lot of shit, yeah.
But instead, the third act decision to invade America and take out this one guy's house could not have been satisfying to the board. Whoever's giving them money.
Yeah, the people who are investing tanks.
Yeah. Whoever's giving them the money.
I gave you a tank, and what did you do with it? You attacked a man in Virginia?
Is he the king of Virginia? I don't understand.
Is he the king? I don't understand. I want to take away the establishment.
Listen, I don't want to be British.
The space.
I don't want to be British. How does this help that?
What did you do with it?
Yeah.
Well, you see, he has a daughter. He's all right, man.
And a wife.
I gotta find. He's I gotta find better terrorists.
Exactly. So that means they're movie stupid too. They're not internally consistent either. So that's a problem. Okay, so they're stupid. The other thing is, and this is as a movie, an audience member, their connection to an actual terrorist plot gets very murky. Mm-hmm. So meaning if I was to if I was to make a movie in 2005 and I picked an Arab terrorist group and said they were a spin-off of Al-Qaeda, you would know what you thought the goals were of that terrorist group, right? An American audience knows what that terrorist group wants to do. These guys in the 90s are a splinter cell from the IRA, a movement that Americans didn't fully understand. They didn't completely understand, who then kill members of the IRA, who then covers up for them. So the IRA still covers up for them, and they turn away from killing a British royalty member to a guy who killed somebody's brother. It's what is the political connection here? You know what I mean? The political connection for a movie audience is so tangled that they
for
can't
an American audience, absolutely.
Right.
Which this is what it's made for.
Correct.
It's Harrison Ford. Because it's absolutely true. It's a foreign civil war kind of concept versus the Al-Qaeda directly saying, no, America, I choose to war you. You know?
It's the moment.
So that's the big difference.
It's the moment in GoldenEye when you find out that the general is actually not a Russian general anymore. He's a spy, and he's using the GoldenEye for his own personal purposes. It gets murky there because you're okay, I understood when he was Russian and it was a government thing. When he's his own
I think
man,
that's cleaner because that's just he's not affiliated with different affiliations. True. His affiliation is just to self. He's just I could do this for my country, or I could just kind of pocket everything and become dictator.
Correct.
I could do this. I'm going to take my shot. So that's a little different.
Cleaner.
But
you're right.
It does add murkiness in any way that a double agent would. But this is unnecessary, I guess, is what you're saying.
Well, I'm saying I'm not saying that it's unnecessary. I'm saying that, again, people show up to this movie and remember this movie for being a political thriller, and yet the politics of it are what are they? You don't remember them really. You don't even remember the cover story for the action movie because there's not that.
There's one conversation that's had about the politics.
Correct.
And I paid attention to it because I was I don't remember the politics, you said.
Exactly.
And I was what is this? And I went back and I rewatched it, and it's that conversation in the bar
with Charlie.
that's being had.
Charlie and Timmy.
With Charlie. And and it's more of I'm with you, brother. I know. It's that kind of stuff as opposed to so here is systematically they're executing us and treating us as lower citizens, and we need to they're just we gotta attack the royals. It's because it comes out of this place where it's just the war has been happening for so long, no one needs to say
Correct.
It. And I understand that is what they're taking advantage of, but you're right, it does kind of make it unclear for people who, let's say, wouldn't
know that.
be
Yeah.
Irish and
Right.
know
Or British.
what the Great Britain internal politics are.
Right. And just
so,
one last contrast here for this, because I think because I'm harping on it, and people might like disagree with it or feel like, well, that's a little subjective. So let's use a similar movie, Ronin, as a counterpoint. Ronin was made in like the mid 90s with Robert De Niro as, it turns out, a CIA agent. And the way that they do the connection of this loose terrorist group is by never totally clearly affiliating them and by adding a mystery to it. Right? So like they have a case. There's a case. What's in the case? And the whole movie you're like, what's in the case, right? And the case is basically the thing that would clearly identify the political cause they're working for. And you never know what it is. And by doing that, they have made the movie more of a political thriller, because you're sort of asking, oh man, what is really at stake here? You don't know exactly what's at stake, but you do know that your characters know more than you do, and you're trying to figure out what the answer is. And there's Russians and there's Scottish people and there's, it's interesting. So contrasting that with this movie tries to explain to you what's going on, but you don't understand it. Ronin withholds the information and creates more interest in the political scenarios. So that's an interesting buttress there, right? Okay.
Sure.
So there's that. Next thing that Patriot Games does that it should not do if it's a political thriller is that it shifts perspectives all the time. Now, it's not that movies don't do this. They do. But this movie spends long scenes that are not just plot or exposition scenes, but emotional scenes with people who are not Jack Ryan. So, like, it has that scene, as you mentioned, in the bar with Jimmy and Kevin, right? The scene that you only really need to meet the girlfriend. It's like kind of the only reason you need it. You don't need it you don't learn anything other than, like, they may not be in the IRA, I guess.
Isn't it plant payoff though?
Is it?
They're planting. I thought for Annette.
They plant that she is actually working with, like, so this guy's a double crosser. That's what you learn from it. But it's like not just that. There's also like emotional content to it. But that's not the best example, but good point. I also would say there's...
I mean, it's just... the scene stands... It's not a bad scene,
It's not a bad scene. No, it's not a bad... None of these are.
It's just... You're right. It does shift perspective because it's trying to weave two complex narratives between two basic ensembles.
Correct. And...
You have the ensemble of Jack Ryan and the ensemble of Sean Bean.
Yes. And Sean Bean in particular, we get a lot of scenes that are just him being the saddest boy about his brother.
Oh, he's so sad.
He's the saddest boy about his brother. And
it really is, man, Sean Bean really, like, he's leaner. It's like a young Sean Bean.
Young.
So it's like, he's real lean and he totally, I think of him totally different than even Goldeneye, like Goldeneye, he like put on some pounds, he like lifts some weights, This is him being kind of like, he's not like a thin guy. I mean, he's still pretty built, but like he definitely, I forgot how young and baby-like his face is in this movie.
He could be like 23 in it. I mean, he's very young.
He could be.
He's very young.
He's very young. I don't know what his age he was, but he looks a lot younger than he does even like 3 to 5 years after
He's
this.
not even full Boromir here. He's not even close to full Boromir.
Oh yeah, because I think you're probably right. It's because it's like he was constant. He just had a career all the time. Yeah,
he's a great actor.
So he's transformative. That's true.
He's a really good actor. So, he's worked a lot. But in this movie, there's a lot of scowling. And again, it doesn't advance the plot. Most of the times when you cut away from the protagonist to the villain, you are advancing the plot. Or you're reminding everybody, look how bad this guy is. This movie, you're spending time with him just to get his emotions. Which you don't do that often.
Works.
Oh, I agree. It works, but it's not... Okay. It does work, but it's not done in political thrillers that often. Sure. In political thrillers, what normally happens is you cut to the villain to learn a piece of the puzzle that the hero doesn't know so that you could be like worried for the hero, usually. Not explicitly.
I see
or again, in a Bond movie, it's like, then you learn, look how evil they are, Mr. Bigglesworth, you know what I mean? Like, you learn that stuff too.
Yeah.
But that's not the scenes we get here.
Sure, yeah. I think we're going to have some discussion about the formal attributes that make a thriller.
That's fine. But sure, that's fine. I'm just saying it's atypical. Not that it has to be this way. It's atypical. It's operating in a way that's
Okay.
different than most political thrillers do.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a type of political thriller.
Sure. Okay, fair enough. So, now, the reason I bring these things up is all of these things that I've mentioned should and normally do make an audience less interested in the movie. They're actually ways of distancing the audience from the key conflict in the movie a lot of times, and they make the movie usually more confusing or ridiculous. And yet, Patriot Games has endured more than endured more than most political thrillers, and started basically America's love affair with Jack Ryan. And the question is why? Why does this one do that?
Why Patriot Games is a great question.
Why Patriot Games? And also, why is this movie undermining the political content so much? Why is it doing that? And here's why. Patriot Games is not about politics, it's about family. It's fundamentally a family drama. That's what it is. And why is it a family drama? Because family stories create more emotional bonds than political ones do. Family stories are better illustrations of political stakes, as the subsequent Jack Ryan movies proved. The fact that Jack Ryan's family is at stake and gets physically harmed and is in real danger, and you spent time with Ann Archer and you spent time with that cute kid, who I believe is Thora Bird, right? Thora Birch?
Yeah, Thora Birch.
Like, you spent time with them and liked them. We watched them talk to an English soldier in front of Buckingham Palace. You know, like you watch Jack Ryan deal with the fish crisis,
making little jokes.
You know,
yeah, it's all very Hallmark.
Yeah, you've spent a lot of time with them as a family. So the fact that they suffer for this terrorist nebulous threat actually makes you more angry about the terrorists and more primally concerned for Jack Ryan than if you had learned it's the Russians, they're back. Or like insert the worst group of people and done a political thriller. Those things get more abstract, and they're only interesting when the chase is interesting. They're not interesting in a fundamentally emotional way, in the way that family stories are. So, interestingly enough, Patriot Games, while posing as a political thriller, is actually more interested in drama than most political thrillers are. And Jack Ryan is poised to us as not a weak man, but a family man, a courageous American family man.
You're right. I defined Jack Ryan as a CIA agent when you asked me to define Jack Ryan series, and you're right. Family is a huge element, although it has been pulled away from the the tropes and structure of these stories, that the Jack Ryan stories. It's become definitely not there.
It's become more
anymore.
of a Jason Bourne analyst thing, right?
Oh yeah, he's a bachelor now, dude. Our new Jack Ryan hangs massive.
Yeah,
dong,
of course
dude.
he does. Right, and my point here is, I think that there's a reason why Patriot Games matters more than the rest of those Jack Ryan movies do. It's because no matter how obvious it is, when you hang real family stakes on a story, people care more. If you do a good job with it. I mean, the directing here was good. It was competent. It wasn't like incredible, but it was definitely serviceable, and oftentimes like shot in a pretty way. But more than that, it's competent emotional scene work, so that like the fundamental stakes, the thing that we care the most about as people, our families, matters in this movie. Whereas in other movies,
how many times
they don't.
In our hero stories do we now, these days, have a character who's like, "Nah, I'm gonna pass on that great opportunity because I don't think it'll be great for my family."
All the time.
You know, all the
No,
time.
I'm just kidding. Never happens.
I was gonna say,
Right,
Doctor Strange really doing that all the time. Yeah, we don't do that anymore, and it's something that is altogether more true to life and also archaic in a sense. And I wonder why. It's kind of weird. I understand because it's got this like heteronormative,
that's
familial,
nuclear,
like kind of established kind of aspect of the family definition, like going on as its definition, and I think that there's problems in that, but it's also someone thinking about something more selfless than, you know, just being selfless in general. I guess thinking of my family is an extension of me. They are me. And so, yeah, I am being selfish in that I am thinking of others. And I'm just being very particular about the others I'm thinking of. It's my family, and I think that there's something, there are family. I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about this because, like, what is a family unit now in terms of, like, how we've kind of redefined it? If you, like, Enter the Spider-Verse and stuff like that, there's, like, the real family, but it's also, like, the Spider family. And, like, there's a lot of different aspects of how we present what a familial unit is now.
That's true. And it's not a coincidence that movies backed away from portraying families as like the primal thing that motivates people, because they didn't want to be heteronormative and they didn't want to define a family only one way. But people didn't stop loving their family. Like, that didn't stop happening. So, like,
I only think it's relevant. The only reason I want to, because you're absolutely right. The only reason I mention it is that I wouldn't say that Patriot Games. It's definitely with the new Jack Ryan's, but it's not entirely, like, Clear and Present Danger also happens. I definitely see that there's a slide over time. But Jack Ryan did get established and persisted for many years as being kind of like a thriller that also had this deeper emotional content that you're talking about.
And the point that I'm making is that I think the reason that Jack Ryan stuck is not the reasons that we like him now. I think that over time, Jack Ryan grew into more of a sort of Jason Bourne meets high-level CIA cipher, which is a thing we like. And I'm not here to say those are bad movies, but the reason we care about him is the same reason that we care about Batman's origin story and Spider-Man's origin stories more than the sequels most of the time, because those origin stories give us the emotional core of the hero that we can relate to.
Yeah.
Like, this is what we connect to. Yeah. There's a primal why. And because of that, we're willing to see more iterations, but it's very rare those other iterations are as good as the origin story is. And I just thought it was really interesting as I was watching this movie. The origin story of this CIA thriller character is basically a family drama. And that's not an accident. It's not an accident. It's also not. I just want to counterpoint the people who would be like, well, yeah, but there's like family plots in a lot of movies. Yes, but they rarely spend the kind of time and like do the kind of scene work that Patriot Games does, where it's like, it matters that his daughter's in trouble. It's not just a clock on a bomb. You know what I mean? Like, it really matters. And it matters that his wife got injured. And even the villains have a built-in family motivation, right? Like, that's the only thing that makes them make any sense, is the fact that Sean Bean's brother is dead and they need to avenge him. So the movie makers fundamentally believe that stuff is actually more engaging than politics, not as a subject, but politics as a movie narrative is. And I think they're right. I think they're honestly right about that.
I think they're right about. I think they both need to coexist for like the thriller aspect.
100%.
There's no family thriller.
Not really. Not really.
It's always like, well, the work aspect of the family. Whoever's going to work, usually, it's the 90s, so it's usually man. The man is going out there and has a problematic job because people are after him, and then shit goes down. That's a thriller. Oh, but also he's a family man. It's more, well, I'll save this to the end.
Well, like, there's a few movies in this category, and they all kind of endure because they're done well. Like, another movie that's very similar to this is The Fugitive. Right? So, like, The Fugitive, I think people still love that movie, and they should. And part of the reason why is they do a really nice job of, like, I didn't kill my wife. Right? Like, that's, like, that thing about how much he loved his wife and, like, the intimacy between them, which, by the way, is a little bit unbelievable for a couple that's been married as long as they have been, but fine. Like, it makes you really connect to this guy. And you're willing to go on this long journey with him, even though he keeps saying, I didn't kill my wife, like, a million times. Like,
right.
But again, like, those primal family things, they matter. And a lot of filmmakers now don't think they matter as much as they do. And so they put them in as sort of narrative engines, and they don't really work. And I think Patriot Games is kind of
interesting.
Patriot Games is kind of a good movie to go back to as a filmmaker and be like, okay, well, this is a movie where that stuff works. Why does it work here and it feels like a thrown in thing in other movies? You know, it's just fun for that.
That's a great. At the very least, acknowledging that those two attempts by screenwriters to appeal to our, visual, like our story senses. There's a big difference between we do categorize it as this feels organic and works versus this is thrown in. It's not. And it doesn't even need to be a nuance of logic. It just feels that way.
Well, I mean, they did have to make structural decisions to the movie to decide what mattered.
Yeah.
Again, if they decided the family wasn't that important, he joins the CIA at minute 30.
When you say structural decisions, do you mean just order of scenes, or do you mean like the actual characters make choices that lead on to the next thing?
Kind of a bit of both. The biggest example of it, I would say, is... again, what I was just saying, which is they don't. If they had decided the family wasn't that important, but was just sort of a side thing, kind of the way that Al Pacino's family is in Heat. That's kind of a good example. Al Pacino's family in Heat is sort of a little bit of an afterthought, which is the point. The point is they're an afterthought. Yeah. And so we keep getting these check-ins, but they kind of don't matter. If that had been true about Jack Ryan, then he would have decided to join the CIA at the end of the first act.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what would have happened.
20, 30 minutes
Instead, we wait to the midpoint. It would just
be like,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. No, it's because we care about this. So you're right. They are making decisions to make it more about family.
And I mean, I just think most of our fans and most people who are just movie fans don't actually understand in a conscious way what makes a movie linger. Why does it linger? Because we're all sort of interested in why do some movies linger and not others, and then we identify worldviews and tactics and techniques. And one of the things that matters the most is doing primal human relationships in a way that are believable, ways that connect, and spending the time on that is irreplaceable. It's an irreplaceable commodity in a movie, and it matters a lot more than whatever monster of the week political operative they're fighting against.
Yeah. I think people are wise to that, but I also think that you're right that you can't, as a production, you can't put less emphasis. There's a reason that drama is a hard to categorize and prevalent genre category in your searches for movies. There's no bigger organization of movies that a search query has to
100%,
do.
Right, totally.
Than drama. Why? Because most of the things we make is drama. It's we just created more nuanced dramas. Or there's drama and comedy.
Yes, drama means not comedy. That's what it means.
Yeah, it's kind of right, or vice versa. And it's but we want it to be got action. Okay, so it's a thriller. Okay, but we want it to be 101's in a courtroom. All right, so it's a courtroom thriller. Yeah. We just keep doing. Right. It's just adding modifiers to be more specific about things that we've seen and worked on us, and we're yeah, more of that, please. And then studios said, yeah, you got it. That's all that's happening. It's just we're just a fungus growing on the planet. It's fucking.
I mean,
it's insane.
Movies are still kind of I know we think of them as a field where there's constant advancements and growth and stuff, but it's kind of fun to go back and watch old movies and understand the things that make them really work are still kind of all the same things. At least I find that fun as a director because because my goal in life is to have access to those things and to understand them and be able to reflect them back to people. And
because things work. Here's the thing. Things work on babies.
Right.
All the babies in the world. You do the peekaboo thing. You do you close your face and then you open your hands and then you go and the baby goes and it's why? Because reveals are interesting.
Yep, that's right.
That's all we're doing why do you like it? Well, it was the funny man fell down the stairs. It's all the basic shit. And then we just make it more complex. I don't know. It's kind of beautiful in its own way, and I love that this movie exists.
Same.
Because like you're right. It like it's. I don't actually know what like your point on whether or not like if you do have a point on like if this thumbs up thumbs down. I'm not quite sure on, because I'm like Patriot Games, for aside from like political weirdness and like the society that was made in, big thumbs up though.
I really like it.
I like that
like
it
it
has
too.
deeper emotional content than like I like that it is an origin story.
Yeah, I mean, again, people knew that they didn't need to complain about Batman Begins, even though there wasn't a lot of violence in it for a long time. Because they were getting like the real emotional content of Batman, so they were satisfied. And I think that's true here too. It's like people know they don't need to complain about like, why don't we get more IRA inner workings and stuff, and like more like time in the Oval Office or whatnot, you know, because they're getting something, they're getting what they want, which is like, this is what makes a man who works in a place like this care. This is what fuels him. You know, his love for his family and the need to make the world more just. You know,
there's something, because I feel like everything at this point in the conversation is like you've hit your thesis.
I'm basically done. I'm wrapped up.
And we're talking about ways in which it is like it supports itself. That if you think about it, it actually is there the whole time. And I don't actually need that. I think that if people do watch Patriot Games and listen to Adam, I think he's really spot on about that. But to continue the dialogue, I think that it's not that I take issue with the logic of how it could be a different movie or structurally it could be rearranged. Like, because you're not really making a qualitative assessment about it. You're just saying it's different. It stands alone.
I'm saying,
a sense, right?
I guess what I'm really arguing, if I had to rephrase the thesis in the aftermath here, is that the movie, people remember it as a political thriller, and it isn't really a political thriller. Yeah. It's really more of a family drama, and that those decisions were made consciously by the writer and filmmaker because they understood what makes people care. And they didn't lean into the wrong things. That's really all.
See, I think, okay, so I still think this. I think that the logic is a little warped because it's not a family drama. I mean, it is in all the ways that you've just said. And I'll get to the point. But Patriot Games also has this political thriller aspect about it. There's no denying that. And what I'm arguing is that, well, two things. One, the concept of being emotionally engaging is something that I've kind of dealt with my whole life in terms of storytelling. I think there's something to be said about not going the family route in this case. I think it's what some people want for movies. Maybe not you or me necessarily. I don't detest, but for example, I don't prefer dysfunctional movies. Like, for some psychological reason, I don't react to them in the same way that other people react. This takes away many films off the table for me, like a lot of the works of Wes Anderson, Charlie Kaufman. I admire the craftsmanship and even like the efficiency or the cleverness of these films, but even when they're at their best, I just can't care. I don't know. I just don't watch the films, you know? So in the end, emotionally engaging is a modifier for a certain type of examination of a film, I think, based on an audience of one. I think conflict and emotion are king in general. We're taught that in film school all the time, right? They say that all the time. Why do you edit? Emotion. What do you tell a story? Emotion. Everything is about conflict and emotion. But how you deploy the structural kind of organization, if we're to think of a movie as a pie graph, if it's like 60% this and 20% this and 20% that, that's your movie. That combination is what makes someone want to watch your film again, and that is particular to that type of person. I'm sure you agree. The second thing, and kind of in support
is the argument
of that,
there, like, well, it's
not as much an argument. I'm just pointing out.
Right. So the point you're making is you don't know that everyone has the same experience of being engaged that you had because of the family stuff.
Exactly. So
I have
because
a
of that,
counterpoint to that, but keep going.
well, it's okay, fine. Because of that, I think Jack Ryan and the creation of like the CIA intelligence this family thriller is structurally on its own, and it exists, and it's fine.
Sure.
It's been mimicked. It's been changed. It's definitely, as you said, not as available now as it was, but it was birthed, frankly, from the same stuff, like things like the Pelican Brief are made of. Like, I don't know if it's a stretch to say that Grisham and Clancy have a similar approach to thrillers. Like, there's a human angle, the joy of finding out conspiracies. A lot of what you said are both of those type of writers, right? Their differences are in the profession that they choose to speak about and the amount of action that they wish that, once again, Pygraph, like how that structurally, what percentages
I
what,
guess so.
right?
I mean, I think... so like at the core level, we're sort of having a conversation about like, well, people are engaged with political topics and political narratives. And we know that because they've made more, and they are mostly that. And also just like the difference between a family drama and a political thriller is really just sort of mostly like a little bit of screen time. You know what I mean? Like those are the keys that you're making. And I don't disagree with any of that, except for I think that family, and I'm going to use that term a little bit loosely, family, when depicted...
I think that's fine.
When depicted... when a group of people is depicted and successfully with the same emotional value that family has, that group of people can be really any group of people as long as they feel like family.
Friends,
in the movie.
Mostly.
And
coworkers.
What's that?
Americans. No, friends, family. Or family, friends, coworkers, America.
Right. The show Friends is basically about family. Like it should be called Family. That's what it is. But like when that's done, that has a sort of like undercurrent of more universal human connection, broadly speaking, than like the Russians are coming. You know what I mean? Or like, I guess not political thrillers in general,
of Jack Ryan too.
but like the bad that you'll pick for a political espionage story is going to be more diffuse and probably linger a little less than like if you do a good job talking about the emotional stakes of this person's family on the whole. Are there particulars that disagree? Sure. Are there people whose families they hate and they'd rather watch a story about the Russians are coming? Sure. I'm not here to debate individual cases, but I can tell you that like this is true of movies, broadly speaking. Broadly speaking, this is true about movies. That's why most movies are still trying to include these tropes, even if they're doing a clumsy version of it, because it's true. Family is one of the fundamental human building blocks. The Russians are not. Neither are the Americans. It just...
Well, threat is
absolutely, and that's why a movie like Jaws is as effective as this movie is for family, because it's like because it gets to the primal feeling of threat. I'm physically in danger, or emotionally in danger, right?
How does Patriot Games not do that though? How is it not like Jaws?
Patriot Games defines the threat by the attempt on the family, and not by like numbers on a graph or like. Or just sort of ideologically charged speeches about what the consequences would be. You know what I mean? Like, so, for instance, like when you watch a movie like Doctor Strangelove, right? Which I know you love that movie. I love it too. Do you ever feel any sense of threat in that movie?
Not urgent. Not
What about
immediate.
Failsafe? Do you feel any threat in Failsafe?
All the time.
That's interesting. I think I feel threat, but not in the same like gut way that I feel threat when I see Jack Ryan's daughter get hit by a car. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. I mean,
It's a matter of degrees.
We were comparing
And
a satire versus like a film that at every turn asks asks itself, am I the right person to make the decision that is going to save or kill millions of people? That's failsafe. Jack Ryan is just, I need to save my family. Here's footage of that.
Right, and I can't, I can't argue.
They're kind of hard to compare to Patriot Games because that is chronologically, transparently displaying the events as they are. Failsafe and Dr. Strangelove are like plays occupying one space that the whole point is that you can't see outside, and so you have to make decisions inside a box. There's no box in Patriot Games to play with. The box, I guess, would be the family or the idea of the space
the box
in
could
which
be
your home.
Again, the box
guess,
could have been watching, and they tried this, like the drones and like here's all the recruiting tools and surveillance for this Irish terrorist group.
Right. Here's the CIA.
But they didn't
and
do
all
that
the
because
power
I think, I mean, again, I can't put the motives into the filmmakers' minds because I don't know, but I think that the filmmakers understood that the family primal draw was at least as substantive as if they had done a really good job of that.
That was kind of what I was arguing, is that it's about the winning combination.
Sure.
It's like,
sure.
It's like when you're making the perfect condiment, how much of that, when you mix them together, like what's your ratio? Like that's the winning 100%. Combination. That's all I was arguing. So when you are talking about, going back to Grisham and Clancy, when it means to me, and I think there's something about the prolonged Act 1 and 2 and the dense Act 3, as you were kind of talking about, it's kind of how that genre works. And it is a genre. It's a genre like James Bond movies are a genre. That's not all spy movies, but it's James Bond movies, and they just keep making them. Jack Ryan's always worked like this. You build the character, you show the players, you take your time, basically. You show us a bit late in the inciting incident, maybe. Not true in Patriot Games. They show us kind of on the dot at 20 minutes, like you pointed out. But like that's kind of something that happens in Jack Ryan films and TV shows, I guess. There's a heavy emphasis on character. The good guys and the bad guys are well established by the end of Act 1, even though we don't understand what's going on. The research and the sequences of figuring shit out with logic or computers or reading or good old-fashioned detective work happens for most of Act 2. And then you bury the lead and you make it seem like it's all going to be fine, and then you return in the original threat in heavy force at the end to show that the protagonists are pretty well equipped for the challenge. It's a very American bootstrap story, right? It's emphasizes workmanship. So it's a small genre, and it's definitely changed. And it's not one of note for certain viewers, like I was saying with, like, for me, Wes Anderson and Charlie Kaufman. It just might not be the cup of tea, but I think it's repeatable, and it functions as a ride, and it works for a subset of those people. So I don't, like, that's true. I'm not saying you're saying that is, like, Jack Ryan sucks because of this. I'm just saying that, like, you're right that it is kind of a shame that the subsequent Jack Ryans went the Jason Bourne
slowly
route,
over
I
time.
guess.
They slowly went that way. Right.
But I think that's just populism working.
Yeah.
That's
movies.
That's just populism. It's just and like I said, our fucking when our industry does return, our industry for a long time, and we're gonna see it now, has been this Katamari Damacy game. It's just slowly collecting these tiny little aspects, and we go like, all right, vote for that, vote for that, vote for that. That there's, of course, there's a hegemony. There's like a monopoly of movie that's happening right now, or we're on the precipice of it. If you want a total monopoly, but like, let's be frank, it's already here, and its name is Disney.
Oh my God!
And
don't start.
The reality is that there's something very human about what you're talking about, the family stories, that they found the winning combination, the special sauce, the right structure and format that makes you feel like you watched a movie today and it was pretty good. That, for the majority of people, has been finely honed. And Disney has just said, okay, it's that.
Let's print and repeat.
And that's the tip of the spear now, and they put all their money towards that spear because it reaps the most benefits. It's just a shame that like things like Patriot Games, things like, I guess, Pelican Brief and such. Like, I didn't think that at the end of this podcast I'd be like, I'm going to, here's the case for Grisham and Clancy. I don't need that in my life. I don't actually believe that. But just an appeal for, you know, a plethora of genres is something that I think is important, I guess.
It's just, it's funny about like movies that franchise based on success, how often the sequels don't have the same emotional substance that the first movie did. That's such a problem so often. Like a good example is, we've talked about it this podcast, is The Matrix, right? So like Matrix Reloaded doesn't really have the same sort of emotional hero's journey of belief at the core in it, right? It doesn't have this guy who like grows into being the one, and it doesn't advance what being the one is. Like, it doesn't do any of that. It's just sort of like more a conversation about fate, and can you choose your fate or not?
There's,
you know, and that's not really what made The Matrix good.
Yeah.
Like the fact, like fate wasn't what made The Matrix interesting. You know, it was sort of like a person coming to understand the power they have when they're freed from the deception of reality or whatever. You know, that's more interesting. And they didn't really go into that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, I have a lot of thoughts just about, like, I mean, we are supposed to, I know it's not, but we're supposed to kind of take it as the origin story of at least the Harrison Ford Jack Ryan, right?
Well, and the only reason they keep saying Jack Ryan, the character, in a more broad sense, is that, I mean, again, Hunt for Red October came out before this, so like it technically is the beginning, but Jack Ryan became sort of a character that we know and root for independent of the movies now. Mm-hmm. The way that Batman became a character that like Batman in this Batman movie, but Batman sort of exists also outside of the movies as like a thing we care about. Jack Ryan's achieved that status now, I would say. You know, like a Skywalker type person, but not that popular.
Not as
but
popular,
close.
but yeah. It's
The James Bond, that kind of character.
Yeah, it's yeah, I guess it's just like one of those things where I think it's straight away from maybe I haven't read any of these books, so I don't even know if they were, I assume that they stuck to their roots, you know, like assume Clancy's writing clear and present danger and sum of all fears, you know.
Well, again, he becomes president in the novel series, so like that doesn't sound like he stuck to his roots. It's
all rah stuff, and that's hard to get around because it's like but everything about it is like covert war, and that is movie filmable, you know, like covert shit
absolutely.
Is like all right, give me some more of that covert shit, you know, like that's
we're a lot more suspicious of it now.
Now we're more suspicious.
Now it's a lot more.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like I don't know. I just think that I think you nailed it. I just think it's fine for it to be about family, and it's not like crazy to me that it started that way.
No, me neither. And this is one of those times where I think the person I'm arguing to is a person who doesn't necessarily think about how movies work.
Yeah, that's fair.
As like an engine, and so therefore walks away from Patriot Games and thinks like a political thriller, wasn't it great? And doesn't necessarily
look for what it's actually like, what its DNA is.
What is
like
it really? Yeah,
judging
what is its
it based
DNA?
on
What
that.
makes it work?
Yeah.
Correct.
Fair enough.
Correct. And I mean, again, like as speaking as like a person who most of our audience is like super fans who are actually more interested at times in like what you might call sort of premise and like execution stuff than necessarily the core stuff. I think about the core of what makes a movie work all the time, because that's my job, both now as an instructor but also as a filmmaker. And it's not like it's magic or mystery. It's not mystery or magic, but it is interesting how often people don't like they misdiagnose it. You know what I mean? Like they don't necessarily understand the thing they saw, like on a core level.
Yeah.
And I do it too. I do it all the time. Like I was surprised by Patriot Games when I watched it. I was like, oh, this isn't really that political of a movie. Huh.
Right.
You know? And so I think that's fascinating.
I think that's, I mentioned James Bond too. Like that's something that is almost a necessity for these repeatable genre blends. Like I brought up, so James Bond is also not political.
Nah.
It's just a threat somewhere.
Yes.
It can be inside of British intelligence even. It can be anywhere. It can be across the world, most likely, though. And, with Jack Ryan, it's the same stuff. Because then the next movie is Harrison Ford again in Clear and Present Danger, and that's about drug cartels. Completely different, department,
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's just like, but CIA, any covert war, I'm your guy. And then I guess he becomes president later. But
he got promoted before Clear and Present Danger.
He works his way up the ladder. That all scans. But yeah, it's like there is an inherent non-political aspect to our political thrillers, if we want them to be repeatable, because it's like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, or whatever. It's it's the case. It's the next case, baby. Next case.
And the further Harry Potter gets away from school, like from being about wizard school, the further it gets from being fun. It stops being fun.
Well, sure. That's a whole different thing.
But like the reason I say that is I think the school experience is actually the primal experience of it. The magic is not.
And you're saying the family is the school in this analogy.
Yes, exactly. That's
I'm
not
what makes
saying that
this
you couldn't
movie
make a Harry Potter
interesting.
I'm not saying that you couldn't make a Harry Potter that didn't take place in school. Of course you could, right? Like I'm not saying you can't do that. But the draw of this idea is like, what if wizards, but they're in school? So there's a fundamental structure that you enjoy, and then they play around with it, right? Like wizard school's silly,
Right. And in the same way, I guess I see, like, what you're saying essentially is what jump-started the Jack Ryan stuff is the family stuff. And
not what kept it alive, but what started it, right?
I mean, if I'm going to be honest with you, what kept it alive is the Harrison Ford stuff, Oh,
of course.
And the fact that Tom Clancy had money and people were knocking on his door because he was pumping out these things that did well. So it's just like a beast. It was like too big to fail in essence, and just make it good. Might as well. Like, I think that's the attitude of a lot of movie making, which is kind of revealing maybe about myself, about what I think about the movie industry. But it's definitely, I just see it and I go, well, why did they decide that one? It's pretty crazy, like the stories of some of these movies. Like, did you know that the whole Baldwin thing, it came out later?
I'm curious to hear the Baldwin thing.
Yeah, because he was supposed to, like, it wasn't made too long after.
They replaced him.
Like, they just said, nope, it's Harrison Ford, baby, which I probably think is a better answer. I think he's a really good Jack Ryan. I mean, I just like to see Harrison Ford. He's fun. And Baldwin is also good, but, like, not
in the same way. Yeah.
And they, so apparently what happened is that the producer was like, basically John McTiernan was slated to be a part of the Jack Ryan stuff.
Well, didn't he direct Hunt for Red October?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So he really wanted Ford, and he thought Ford was the right answer. And he said, and this is on the Wikipedia, I'm just reading this right now. It says, confirmed there was,
Great.
quote, a great deal of scheming that went on to push Alec out of that part. And it's
God,
because
really?
there was the studio and John McTiernan wanted to, like, due to a large debt owed to Baldwin from an unproduced film, like they had him on contract, they wanted to just like burn one. Like that was what happened, is they were like burning one so that they could essentially get to Ford.
Wow.
Yeah, so basically when Baldwin then said in negotiations, I insist on doing a little bit of script approval, and they're like, no dice, you're out of here. And they're like, they just needed one excuse to break contract because they wanted Ford and they had to produce Patriot Games. They were like, that's the answer, right? Yeah, if Patriot Games are, clear and present danger, that's the next step, right? And they're like, yeah. They're like, yeah, but then it's with Alec. And they're like, oh. So they're just like, yes. So that, and also McTiernan didn't direct this one. Do you know why? He declined to direct because his Irish American background. That's pretty cool.
Oh,
good for him.
He didn't like the
He's like,
subject
I don't
matter.
Need to be a part of a movie that does that.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think that's super valid. I respect the shit out of that.
Man, that guy
McTiernan's
John
fucking
McTiernan,
on point.
Yeah.
He fucking
He had a
knows
hell
what's
of a
up.
career.
Dude, have you heard him speak? Like, just
No, I
listen
haven't.
to the DVD. He fucking kills it, dude.
You love him
kills
so
it.
much.
I love him so much.
He's your Pedro Almodovar. You just
dude,
love him
he
so
fucking
much.
kills it, dude. He just knows it. And he speaks exactly like you wouldn't expect him to speak. Like, you expect him to kind of be like John Ford type, right?
Yeah, but it turns out he's Anthony Hopkins.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dude, this motherfucker's
great.
dropping mise-en-scene all the time. He's,
Wow.
he is trained in like French, like new wave stuff. That's like his bag. That's the shit that he like goes home and snorts. Like he's.
Well, but again, that just reinforces. So that just reinforces to me that like. You really don't get these successful directors who make a lot of good movies who don't understand what movie making is. Like that just doesn't really happen. Like
No.
it's you get directors who get a shot at it, who are sort of just like entitled babies or not that good or don't understand how films work, but they don't keep making movies because they screw it up. McTiernan knows how to do this. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah. There was
so I'm not surprised by that.
There was it was really weird because I had a friend of mine who was like really good at fencing, and she actually was the stunt double of Lindsay Lohan in the Meet the Parents, Parent Trap, that's the name of it. Parent Trap,
wow.
when they have a fencing scene. And she was like Junior Olympics, and and she was really good at it. And I remember I went to one of her meets, and I just come out of a lecture from one of my favorite professors, and he was harping on the number of decisions that have to be made before like action is called. Like the absolute decision-making process and like how that is made and what is the wisdom there that a professor can give a student. And he had a whole lecture about it, and we watched some films and we talked about it. Point is, that's where my head space was at. And then she went and she did some fucking fencing, right? And I was watching, and we're probably drinking and cheering her on, because that's what you do when you're
sure.
I don't know. You go to fencing. You go to your friends' fencing meets and you get drunk like idiots, and we're cheering her on, which there was no one to cheer on fencing. It's kind of sad, but especially college fencing. But I remember having this like weird like high moment where I was like thinking about it, and I was like, man, because it was like the particular fencing that she was a part of, is it would be like they'd whistle or the buzzer would go, and then it was over within a second. And it was like, and I asked her about it. I was like, what's that deal? Like, why is it over in a second? Don't you want to like fence? You know, that was my interpretation of events. She was like, no, it's more like rock, paper, scissors. It's like, I came with this thing and they weren't good enough to parry it. So I won. And this one time that I was an idiot and I was overconfident and I went this way. And I was like, oh, like a pitcher does, like pitching on the outside of the plate versus the inside of the plate. She was like, yeah, probably. I don't know. And I was like, and it made me realize, like, as I was thinking about all these filmmaking stuff, is that one shot after another is truly that. It's a war of attrition of single battles, you know? And when you make a shot and you do a thing, a director has to be so confident in mind, and like you were saying with John McTiernan or these directors that are so confident about knowing how to make a movie, it's not that they're well equipped for the shot that they're about to shoot, but rather they're well equipped for any shot that crosses their desk. And I think that is something to be said about good directors, is that they are well equipped for any shot.
I actually think pitching a baseball game is a pretty good metaphor, because there are sort of layups, you know what I mean? Like there are moments that are easy or easy batters or whatever when you're directing.
Right.
And then there's these moments where, like, man, the world's against you and you got to pick the right thing or the whole game's lost. And it is an endurance challenge. Like, directing requires a lot of patience and a lot of endurance. And also you're not allowed to get up there and melt down. Like, you got to stay poised, you know what I mean? Especially when things don't go your way, you got to stay poised. So, you know, Clayton Kershaw would make an amazing director is really the point of this episode.
Got to make it a Dodgers thing.
Greatest pitcher of all time, baby.
I mean, yeah, he's up there.
He's up there.
He's up there.
Yeah, he's up there.
I mean, I think a few people have some things to say, but who can say? I
Bob
don't really
Gibson.
care about
Are you a Gibson
greatest
boy?
of all time. Huh?
Are you a Bob Gibson boy?
Bob Gibson. I don't know.
You love Bob Gibson. You love him.
I don't love him. I don't know. There's a lot of people. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk for 30 minutes about pitchers. That's what the audience clicked on this for.
I don't know. Probably not Maddox.
No.
Probably not
Maddox
an
is
old
better
timer like Cy Young. Probably not Clemens.
What about that pitcher from like the 1910s? There's like a guy who pitched for like
Koufax?
30 years. And not
No,
Koufax,
not,
but he's
1910s. I thought you said 60. Tens. I don't know.
Walter. I don't know.
I don't go like that. My brother
think of
would
it
know.
later.
I think I memorized the baseball encyclopedia, but I cannot recall most of any of that. All I know is like some Ty Cobb facts and some Ted William facts. That's about it. I don't even remember Babe Ruth. That's how I treated it. I was like, Babe Ruth. Everyone knows Babe Ruth facts.
As a subject matter that we struck out here.
Yeah, we really did. No. When it comes down to it, I think, well said. I think that what you're saying about how it's structurally on its own in terms of the Jack Ryan stories, and that it's fundamentally about family, I think are both very on point. I think that there's more to be said, and I have aired them about why that's true and what decisions were being made that facilitated those decisions or that result. But I think ultimately your observations are really spot on, because you know what it is, because you're good at it. So good job, my man.
I do my best. Thank you. Thank you. It is fun to go back and watch these movies that you loved but don't remember that well. Because you don't. I find a lot of times when I go back and watch them, I liked them for different reasons than I thought I did. Like, what I remembered about it is not what the movie is. I find that a lot, especially from stuff from my childhood and like young adult years.
Yeah,
there's a lot of that. This
one I remember watching a few years ago and being like, maybe it's Clear and Present Danger that I liked. You know, like I remember.
Yeah.
Because like you're right about that. It makes you think that you're gonna sit in a Jack Ryan but it is the Jack Ryan. It's like the OG Jack Ryan, basically. Even though it isn't, I understand. But then the thing has been transformed and regurgitated to you so differently that you're like, oh, doesn't leave the taste that I remember. But as a kid, I ate this shit up, dude. I love Patriot Games. I thought the whole assassination in the street was in this movie.
The assassination, it is in the movie.
No, not the assassination in the street. Sorry, I misspoke. I don't mean the assassination of the British Royal, but like the shooting of all of the cars in Clear and Present Danger. That sequence. I totally thought that was the finale of this movie for some reason.
Right, because you assume.
I just truncated it all.
I think people just assume because they have an idea in their head about what these movies are. Yeah. They sort of go back and retrofit it to Patriot Games.
I think you're right about that.
It's like, no, that isn't actually what it is, which is weird, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's
we
like
did it.
A fine movie. Yeah, it's fine.
I still really like it. I personally want more Clear and Present Danger-y version of Jack Ryan's story personally, but I don't. But I also find that those movies kind of fly right out of my head more than Patriot Games does.
Who's the best role in this movie?
Well, it's hard to take James Earl Jones out of any movie he's in because he's so great.
James Earl Jones is really good.
I also think Thora Birch is good in this movie, by the way.
I also think that like the 1-2 scenes that Richard Harris is in,
it
has nothing
right.
to like. He's really good, and that's true. But it's just like how he's dressed and like what he says. He's just okay, like he's just like not even in the movie because he's not really a part of the movie. He's not. He's like a red herring, and it's just really funny to me because it's just the whole time. It's just like, okay, why are you coming at me, weird guy? I'm just in bars having drinks with my friends. He's like, nah, you're up to something. I know it. He's like, no, man.
I really like him as an actor. I was actually sad that he died before he could do the entire Harry Potter series.
Sure.
As Dumbledore, because he was like perfect tonally, like just right on.
Yeah, he had. I don't know. I think that. I don't think he. If he wasn't at the end of his life, basically, he would have been perfect.
He was a little old. Yeah, he was a little old.
He was too old because there's stuff that he was going to have to do that they were going to have to CG like crazy. Because he's just low energy. And there's a bunch of high energy shit that Dumbledore needed to do. But his look and his like approach is like the wise sage who's almost dying is like kind of awesome. And I think we got the best version of it. I'm very sorry he died, obviously. But like at a certain point, I don't think he was the right Dumbledore for that audience.
But
he was the perfect first Dumbledore.
God, we need to. Okay, some other time we'll do a Dumbledore conversation.
Dumbledore.
I like Gambone a lot as an actor.
Oh, he's the best.
But I didn't like him as Dumbledore because I liked Richard Harris's sort of like dry amusement thing.
It's just like
that. I just kind of missed it because it seemed so perfect. Your points are good though. So let's do a Dumblecast.
Put a pin in this episode about Patriot Games where we talk about who's the best Dumbledore. We've really gotten far from the
we did it
far into the
we
weeds.
Did it.
So I think that's a sode.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. If you say so.
I love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the Small Beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.